All right, this is our Agile After Dark show about agile urban legends. In this episode, we talk a lot about pins from 1776, and we find out that Christy knows more than she is willing to admit.
Welcome to Agile After Dark, the podcast that addresses agile topics not talked about in the light of day. Today's episode is Agile Urban Legends, Fun with Folklore. I'm your host, Greg Adams-Woodford, and with me today I have Brandon Gartley, our resident nerd, and not really just about Agile, just generally a nerd. We are also joined by Christy Clement. I have a hard time describing Christy. I don't know. Christy, if you want to talk about yourself and a little bit about your background, I think that would be the best way to move forward.
Wow, thanks for putting me on the spot there.
That's
that
what
was
I do.
that
That's
was
what
wonderful.
I do. I'm called the host, okay?
About me, like Agile-wise,
Just in general,
you know,
sailor.
general adventurer, do a little Agile on the side. Love doing it. I've been doing Agile for 7.5 years, you guys.
Wow, 7.5 years.
I know, I get very precise about that,
You
like
must-
until apparently
Yeah.
You must be very young.
so young.
And Brandon, how about you? Being a resident nerd, I've tagged you with that. Maybe that's true. Maybe that isn't true.
No, I think it's true. I'm the guy that likes to look up stuff, act like I know what I'm doing, and tell other people about it. So.
Well, and we're going to find out because some of the things you're talking about will actually prove that. So what I want to do is say we're here in Tucson, Arizona. We're in a hotel that is the westward look. There's no way I'm saying that.
It's a tongue twister, man.
It is a tongue twister, but more importantly, the most important thing is that we're in the room that John Wayne stayed in when he was making movies in Old Tucson, at the studios in Old Tucson, and in fact, we also have used the bathroom that he used. So,
which is shared, so it's not like this
Shared
weird.
bathroom.
Of course, we'd be in the room and use his bathroom. Yeah.
that's correct.
Makes sense to me.
So
There were some pooping jokes earlier,
There
but
was. We all decided to
I
spend a
brought
little
it up.
time in there to make sure that we could have that story later on. So what we want to do is jump into kind of what we're talking about. This is Agile Urban Legends, Fun with Folklore. This is one talking about topics that are kind of they're typical or standard, but that maybe there's a little twist to them. And so we're gonna think about the other side of these the folklore of Agile and urban legends. So Brandon, I think you have the first section. There's something about pins and labor, some weird old-timey thing.
Yeah, you want me to get to how we got here? I mean,
Sure.
I don't know. I thought it'd be a good
Sure.
place to start. How far you want me to go back? You want me to go like way back or just kind of like
Well,
a
if
little
you bring
bit?
up some like, if
Are we
it
going
goes
like-
back to the 1700s, if you're going to start there, are you?
I'm probably going to start there.
Oh, unbelievable.
I want to hear this.
Yeah. How
let's
did
hear
I
it.
know? How did I know?
Right?
We might
Yeah,
cut you
How
off.
did I know?
Yeah.
I'm in charge of sound,
Yeah.
so
look, little Scott named Adam Smith came up with this great little book called Wealth of Nations. And the whole idea behind it is he noticed that, when people were making pins, it took 12 steps. Now, I don't know what kind of pins they were back that day.
So like
but
writing pens?
yeah,
or
no, like pins, like PINS, pins.
Like
You
a
pin
pin?
the thing. Yeah. But there's 12 steps to making a pin back in 1776 for some reason.
Okay, and you
Yeah.
found this where?
Yeah, it's in his book. You never heard of Wealth of Nations?
I
It's
have.
kind of one of those core things.
I
that-
had, yeah.
I feel like back in high school economics or history or something like
It's a little
that.
light reading.
I mean, Adam Smith is like the invisible hand guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. He is.
Wait a
That's
second.
He is.
Stop. You're verging on nerd. Knock it off, Christy. You're getting a nerd.
That's all I know. That is all I know.
So the whole idea is he was, watching these people making these really complicated pins back in the day, and each person was making one pin, and they said, hey, wouldn't it make more sense to have people do different steps of that, right? And so that kind of gave us into like the waterfall thing. But interestingly enough, a lot of people, because he came up with this concept, people thought Smith, thought that people weren't very intelligent. But the truth is, he said, no, it's actually the assembly lines actually what make people unthoughtful. They just kind of do what they do without much
The assembly
thought to
line
it.
that he created.
Yeah. So
Okay, I'm not too bored yet, so keep going.
yeah. So not, a little bit later than that, if we're going to get into software development, right? Not a lot of software in 1776. So a little bit later, in 1970, Dr. Winston Royce, who was a director at Lockheed Software Technology Center, came up with what's called the Royce model. And this is really considered kind of how he got to waterfall.
Is this like Royce of Rolls-Royce fame?
No, it's not.
just
yeah.
checking.
Yeah, just good
Gotta
old
know.
Dr. Royce.
Our listeners are going to want to know.
Yeah, they're gonna want to know, and especially since it's probably the 5 people that are listening to this. That
5, including mom. Hi, mom.
yeah, right. So maybe 6 with some cousins mixed in, right? But since some of them, I don't know how much your mom knows about Agile, but this is kind of the beginning of Waterfall, and he kind of came up with this easy read of 11 pages that kind of reads like a Dan Brown book. Instead
I
of
do know Dan Brown.
You know Dan Brown?
I do know Dan
But I
Brown.
don't think Dan Brown wrote about Agile.
Yeah. So this page turner of a paper has instead of kind of the religious symbols that a Dan Brown book would have, it has kind of like all of like our the steps through the gateways and all of those things and stuff like that. And that was kind of no one really thought about building software that way before, right? But even he in that paper, recognized that it was risky and invites failure if you're going to follow this model, and even proposed prototyping in the paper. So for us as Agilists, it's kind of interesting. We always think, the way that Waterfall kind of carried on from there, we thought that, wow,
So is this the guy that wrote the paper? Because I always hear this anecdote of the waterfall paper that had the picture of the waterfall, and at the end of the paper, which nobody read to because they only saw the picture and then created the waterfall model, he said, "Don't do this; it won't work." Is that the guy?
Yeah, that's the guy.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
again, approaching nerddom.
Yeah.
Christy.
Good.
Okay.
Not that I've read the paper. I've just heard the story, and I retell that story. That's all I know.
So risky invites failure is the wording that he used.
Whoa.
Not why did I do this? It's crap. Right. So from there, kind of a lot of the big players in software development kind of decided to take this on and adopt it, including like the DoD.
Because of the picture. That's what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. But and through the 80s and stuff, the DoD experimented with Waterfall quite a bit, and they ran into a lot of problems. In a review, I think in 1999. The rates in a sample of the DoD project showed they had really messed up. I think, if I'm reading this correctly, of a total of $37 billion for the sample set, 75% of the projects failed or were never used, and only 2% were without extensive modification. So that's we kind of from those ashes, if you will, of failure. Kind of rose
the Phoenix is Agile. Is that what we're saying?
We're going to Phoenix is Agile. Why not? We'll just go there.
Wow.
But I'm not going to go into kind of the whole manifesto. I mean, we're at our own little resort here, so it kind of makes me feel like the Lodge and Snowbird Ski Resort in Utah. Like, hey, that's what they're.
Yep. I do. I know a little bit about that.
Yeah. The manifesto.
I'm not a nerd.
Yeah. So
Mr. Greg.
that kind of like that progression of, hey, we're going to just not have one person working on one pin. We're going to have them work on the different parts of making the pin.
Does anybody find it interesting that all these Agile companies are either in Utah or Boulder, Colorado? What's going on with that? Is it the rarefied air? I mean, how's it all centered around those places?
I was really hoping for the common denominator to be like Washington State and Colorado, because I can tell you what the difference is there.
Okay.
Well, no, I wasn't. Should I say it?
Well, I think we all know.
Yeah, I think we do now. And California was just added. So, so that's. I just think it's interesting. It's at the Snowbird Ski Resort. What were they doing? Okay.
I would have liked to have been a fly on that wall.
That would be interesting.
A few drinks were flowing and some ideas were put out there, and
Interestingly, drinks are flowing here.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
not enough.
Yeah,
I would say.
I find this funny that we're calling this Agile After Dark because the plan has been always that we would be, having a few beers while we're recording this podcast, because that's what makes us funny.
Yeah, so we have to give some props out to Sonny because he's the one who came up with the Agile After Dark.
Yeah, thank you, Sonny.
Show name. Thank you,
Appreciate
Sonny.
that.
But actually the concept for the podcast did come about as we were at some meeting all together, the three of us, talking about drinking and talking about some of the things that we found sort of tedious or humorous or misconceptions about Agile, and having a little fun with it. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, especially when this episode about urban legends, fun folklore, we're trying to kind of get into those. And I think the next kind of the next section is kind of going to talk about like what are the things that people assume about Agile or take advantage or overuse. Now, a lot of times these words use us before we can use them. The word transformation comes to mind. The word Agile comes to mind. The words, all the things that we say on an ongoing basis, innovation, all these things, they tend to lose their currency because they get used so much and they lose their power. So part of what we want to do is kind of bring us back to how those things started and have a little fun with it. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, but if you have questions or feedback, please send them to feedback@agileafterdark.com. I started doing Agile in 1999, 2000. Now, I sucked. I didn't even know what it meant, but literally, that was about the time that I started. And we used cards instead of Post-it notes, right?
Because that was back in the day before Post-it notes?
Not necessarily, but
Are you that old?
What was interesting, yes, I am that old. And yes, we used cards because they didn't have sticky stuff back then in those days.
They
didn't invent glue.
Did you have like Elmer's glue?
No. So we used these cards. Thank you. We used these cards, and we would put the cards literally, I'm not joking, we put the cards all over the floor. And that's how, it was basically story mapping before I knew what any of these terms meant. It was story mapping. And so I would do every one of my presentations in my house, on my bedroom floor, there would be cards everywhere all over the floor. And my wife was like, what is wrong with you? And we'd do it at work. We'd have cards all over the floor. So anyway, that's just a fun little anecdote about my age. So for this next bit, we're going to talk about the top 5 urban legends around Agile.
So I want to know, top 5, how did we come up with that?
You don't remember when we were all yelling at each other in the room and whoever was the loudest
I do remember that.
got theirs in? Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty much how we got
Very
here.
scientific.
Which is, why Greg gets number 5 instead of number 1.
Okay, well, then I'll take that as my cue to go. So number 5, it's that Agile only works in startups. And what I think is interesting about this one is that if you're in a startup, you have to be Agile because you're just looking for your next customer. So there's no way you cannot operate in an Agile, even if you're not calling it that, because you won't be in business. The other thing is you have a direct line to your customers in startups, whereas in larger organizations, sometimes it gets abstracted because the enterprise is so large that there's more service related work versus direct customer related work. So you lose line of sight with the customer.
Yeah, I mean, you've had some experience in startups, right? So, I mean, you've kind of seen the best and worst of both worlds. I mean, it is more innate to startups in that way, or it's just it really is such a struggle in the larger ones that it doesn't work?
Well, the first job I had really was at a startup. The first real job I had was at a startup. And in fact, we didn't call it Agile, but we acted in a very Agile way, which is sort of how I learned how to think that way. But we didn't call it Agile then. I mean, I'm sure Agile was a word that was used because it's been used for a long time, but we didn't think about it that way. But because of the way we had to operate from not only just a business perspective, but everybody had to know and understand the goal of the business and be able to execute. So it just was innately an Agile function.
So are we not just proving the urban legend here?
It's a good question. What I'm going to say, though, is that it's easy to do it in a startup. It's not easy to do it in a large organization. And
but can we do it?
Yeah.
Is the question.
It was the only really works it only really works in the startup. And I think we probably all had experience in large organizations where we've had wins.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I can point to lots of teams in, huge Fortune, 10 and 50 companies that have had really major wins because of their Agile teams and Agile programs and things like that, for sure.
And I might argue that it actually works better in large organizations because that's where you need that sort of thinking and mentality as opposed to a startup.
I think the impact is bigger.
Yeah.
Is what I would say about that. Yep. It's hard to do, especially when they're used to all of the waterfall governance and BS, right? Mm-hmm. We love that.
Well, we've all had experience because that's most of the companies we're working for now are large organizations, right? Because they're trying to make this transformation into Agile. So I think that is a myth, and I think that everything that points in the market now towards the transformations are to large organizations.
Which takes us to our number 4.
People talk about Agile doesn't work in larger projects, right? Or really large programs.
Well, and we all know that, and I can only say this through experience of being an executive. It always fails at the executive level. Almost always, an Agile initiative will fail because of senior management not supporting it.
So Greg is saying it's all your fault.
It is all my fault, and I've been coached a lot over the years to make that not happen. So
okay, but we're supposed to be disproving the myth, right?
And I think we are. I think we've all seen it, and we kind of talked about it on the previous point, which is, we've seen wins that do make a big difference at large organizations. Mm-hmm. Now, for the Fortune 10 to 50, are you going to make the entire organization and their systems safe or agile in some way?
That's way harder and takes years.
Right? Yeah, but it has been done, Mm-hmm. So, and I think, so that is kind of one of those things when we're talking about these myths, right? Which is, if I'm an executive, I'm pointing at Greg because this is a visual podcast.
I only brought that up because I wanted to talk about myself.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear it, Greg.
Yeah, but if I'm an executive, then one of the things I'm thinking about Agile is I'm hearing these things. Right, these are the myths that I'm hearing, and I'm kind of interested in that's why I thought when we were yelling at each other, we had some good points that kind of snuck through.
I wonder if we can convince the bartenders in that bar when we were doing that.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. We should have had them vote.
Yep.
So there's the next thing that we have is what this would be 3 is talks about documentation. That Agile has no documentation. The point is that it's trying to reduce waste. So you're trying to do less documentation, not no documentation, because we know that artifacts are an important part of any business initiative. And in some cases they're required, especially if you're in like financial services, for instance. There has to be a certain amount of documentation for the business to function from a legal perspective.
Yeah. And I think, this one's a little bit different, not in the sense of, why would I not do Agile? This is more of like the executives, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, looking at Greg, being like, oh, hey, yeah, we don't need to do documentation, so we're not going to do that anymore.
The executives? I've seen lots of other people being like, woohoo, no more documentation. I'm so excited. Did you see the manifesto? It says no documentation. But it doesn't say that. Does not say that. It just says we are going for working software over comprehensive documentation.
Business analysts cringe when they see Agile because they're like, well, what am I going to do? Because my whole job is writing documents.
But we love our business analysts. Their skills are amazing.
Analysts. That's right. That's absolutely right. And we love them even more when they adopt Agile principles.
Yes, for sure. You hear that, business analysts? So the last one we talked about was not being able to meet deadlines. And sure, we can fool ourselves that Waterfall was amazing at meeting both the scope and the deadlines, and then being amazing for the customer.
Right.
Let's all raise our hands if that ever happened.
Yeah. DOD really found that out.
Yeah, I love asking that in my classes. So I keep track of how many people I've trained over the last 7.5 years.
How many?
Over 2,000.
And I'm one of those, by the way. I'm in the top 10% tier, though, right?
Yeah, for sure. Right. I also, in addition to the number, I also keep track of my favorite students.
Right.
Greg
exactly
was
right.
definitely there. But I love asking people, kind of just by raise of hands, how many people have had a successful waterfall project where they not only came in, by the date with the right scope, but also pleased the customer. Guess how many people answer that question with an affirmative? Like nobody, right? So I think sometimes we look upon waterfall projects with rose-colored glasses that like they were amazing. And so therefore, like this Agile thing, if we don't hit the deadline with exact scope, then we failed. But the reality is we weren't being successful before. So not to say that Agile's not successful, but what we want to focus on is a little different. We don't want to focus on deadline and scope. We want to focus on making our customer happy. And if they're really crazy about the date, like we need to go live by X, we're going to get them the most important stuff by that date.
Well, and Christy, what about I don't think it's just about making a customer happy. I think it's about making the people who are working happy as well,
That's a good
because
point.
In so many places that I've gone into where I've gone in and was hired to clean up a problem, most of the problems were related to people not being connected to their work. They were unhappy. They didn't know why they were there. They didn't know why they failed all the time. One thing I love to say about Agile is Agile washes away the shame, because there's constant failure and guilt associated with those waterfall.
That's probably why I
projects,
liked
always.
it so much, because there was so much shame. Like
Shame,
back when I was
yeah.
a waterfall project manager.
Oh,
shame.
Wasn't that fun when you had to always like walk up to everyone every day and say, like, hey, how are we doing it? Where are you on this? Like, I know it's due in 2 days.
My developers hated me. I hated
I
myself.
can't imagine that though. You're so
maybe
fun.
Yeah, but I was a pain in the butt. I wanted to use a different word there, but I'm trying to be really good. I've only had one beer. But yeah, not that was part of the reason that when I sort of learned about doing Agile the right way, because I did it the wrong way first, I was in love with it, because all of the stuff that I hated about just bugging the crap out of developers every day, and like, where are you with this and where are you with that, and oh, that date that you told me not to put down on my Gantt chart, I put it down anyway. I didn't have to do that stuff anymore, and I could actually like treat them like real people.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I would do, because selling Agile to executives is a hard thing, because they're so used to waterfall and they want reports and they want data. They don't know why they want it. They just want it. They need to see a report. Is I would do this thing that I call stealth Agile, where I would go in and we would just start doing things. And then pretty soon people were like, well, they seem happier. Maybe we should look at what they're doing. And then pretty soon it becomes an infectious thing throughout the organization. And then things are working. And then you're like, oh yeah, we're doing Agile. And they're like, oh, I guess we're doing Agile now. But, because otherwise that whole big bang, let's all sell it and try to do it. It's just a hard way to do anything. Would you agree, Christine?
I totally agree. I've seen some clients that the best buy-in has come when they don't use any of the Agile words. We just sort of introduce those concepts, to your point, the stealth Agile, and not that they think they made it all up themselves, but they really own it because they came up with it, and it might take a little bit longer, but they truly, I feel comfortable walking away from an organization like that. They're not going to just revert back to how they were doing things before, because they believe in it.
Yeah, and I would say there's sort of these three kinds of ways to think about Agile. One is this sort of ethereal kind of abstract way. One is actually getting it in your head, meaning you know the rules and the principles, and then there's you actually live it, right? And I don't know why people turn into robots when they go to work, because in your own personal life, you don't behave that way, right? And so why does it change when you go to work? And so that's one of the things I try to tell people that I stress a lot when I'm talking to people is this is no different than the way you do the rest of your life, live the rest of your life. Things come up, you change, you adapt, there's no different. It's not that complicated. One thing, I'm adding this to the list, okay? I'm going to have a rant here. This is a rant, Greg's rants.
Oh God.
I forgot my rant. I haven't got the rant.
Well,
I forgot what the rant.
as you were talking about that, I was thinking we should, as a future podcast, talk solely about how people do Agile stuff at home. I will tell. So Jason and I, audience, you're listening. My husband is also an Agile coach, but you guys know that.
He's listener number 7, actually.
Oh yeah, good point. Hi, sweetie. You should see how many Post-its that we have at home, guys. Oh, what I was going to say is Agile. Oh, too many beers. Jason's an Agile coach too, and we really do use this stuff at home, and lots of Post-its at home.
Yeah, I remember when I started, my family told me to stop coaching them at one point. They literally, I'm not joking, they actually told me, stop coaching me. And that's the truth. But think about it, that's why a roadmap is better than a plan, right? A plan is just a string of artifacts of prior failures. And that's what a process is, right? It's a roadmap is you have an objective and you're making commitments, but you're just not sure how you might get there. And there may be things along the way that change, but you're still making a commitment. So one of the other myths is you don't make commitments in Agile. That's not true. You do make commitments in Agile. You just are aware that things may change over time, right? And a plan implies that you make a plan, and how many times I'm sticking to my plan. Doesn't matter how absurd that is. I'm sticking to my plan. Well, stop using any P words. Process, plan, just stop it. They're all bad. They're all bad.
Yeah, P
Do
words.
clients love it when you say that? When you go in and you just say, stop using P words?
I actually do say that, and I didn't think about it until just now, because I do now remember all the looks I got, and I'm like, oh, maybe that did sound weird.
I think you should really take that feedback into your
you.
future clients.
I'm writing that down right now.
You're
It's
welcome.
Sticky.
Oh my god.
All right. So what are we doing next?
All right. So number 1 is because You notice I haven't said anything yet because I just kept saying things on repeat while the two of you came up with creative ideas. I kept saying the same thing, which is this concept of the inmates running the asylum, right? And what I mean by that is, the idea that the best way to approach work is coming from the team level. That creates some chaos and a kind of a free-for-all, right? If you're looking at, and say we call the program or portfolio, but basically anything outside the team, the idea that they kind of own the work and are looking at it, that somehow creates an issue. And it's very much against the command and control, right? It's pushed down the team. And so that's kind of raises some concerns, I think, from levels above the teams. The teams love it, obviously, right?
Yeah, well, the inmates love it when they get to run the asylum.
Oh,
so.
yeah, 100%. So yeah, and I think, and it's kind of the reality too in working this now knowledge economy, right? I mean, the expectation is that people are going to be given responsibilities and they're going to be asked to kind of carry through it based on the work and knowledge that they have. And as we say all the time, I do a lot of team coaching, and the team, it's so funny, they kind of almost have kind of this thing in their head where they're saying, oh, wait, I'm the one that knows it best, and I'm the one that's supposed to be able to say to the people telling me what needs to get done that this is the best way to do it. It very much breaks that cycle.
I have seen some kind of dysfunctional Agile teams where the inmates are kind of run on the asylum when we don't have a really good vision and roadmap for those teams driven by the customer to say, hey, here's where we should be going. And if our product owner is from technology and we just decide what the heck we want to do by ourselves, and we're not really doing Agile right, then sure, that can happen. But if we've got product owners from the business, then they're really being good about setting that strategy, then this shouldn't happen.
Well, let's give people who do the work agency to do their work. How about that? That's a novel idea.
Whoa.
Yeah, well, and I think, it comes down to, I think you were saying it earlier, Greg, about kind of it helps the teams. It helps the people that are doing the work, right? And so there's the whole idea of kind of pride and motivation. And we've all seen it with teams. But I was reading an interesting study recently that was done by Yale.
What, you were reading a study? Oh, crazy.
Yeah, I know, right? Anyway, so yeah, there's a Yale study about janitors in hospitals in Massachusetts. And
wait, hold on a second. You're seriously going to talk about janitors in hospital?
Right. Because think about the one job when everyone's like, yeah, that's not the job I would want to do. I'm not going to get motivated to do that job. But they found all these janitors at this hospital in Massachusetts, and they were really love their jobs. And they're like, what is going on? Right? And so what they found is that they were self-motivated in terms of the patients and the people that were there to visit the patients. Mm-hmm. Right?
That they were contributing to that overall happiness and health and things like that.
And helping people in times where it could be a little rough. Mm-hmm. So if people were in the waiting room late at night and asleep, they wouldn't come in and vacuum the carpet, right? Because that was a task that they were supposed to do, but they looked at it and said, no, that's not right for the people here. We're not going to mop the floors at this particular time of day because that's the time that this particular inmate, I'm sorry about the inmates though, right?
I know people in hospitals sometimes feel like inmates.
Probably feel that way, right? Yeah, so patients would, that an older patient would get up and that's when they would, take a walk, mm-hmm. and they were worried about him falling down, and so they kind of had that pride and that self-organization, that self-motivation.
And empowerment.
Yeah. Exactly. And so it's, it kind of translates to me, in terms of kind of giving teams that level mm-hmm. of, hey, I want to do things the best way because I know how, rather than here's all your tasks, get them done. Right. And that if janitors can do it, then software developers and testers certainly should be able to.
All right. You saved yourself on that one, nerd. That was a good story, actually. I'm going to like that one. So I think we're going to take a break here, and we're going to regroup and blah, blah, whatever that means. So
and some ads from our commercial sponsors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's a crumb story for you.
Oh, here we go.
You know what we say about Crumb? Slinging wisdom with a side of cheesesteak when he opened his restaurant. Because he would always have all these funny things to say. And it's like slinging wisdom with a side of cheesesteak. I'm as enamored with all of the Agile podcasts and websites and articles and blog posts as Nerd Brandon. So I'm going to say, because I come from the business world, so for me, the business outcomes are are the interesting thing, and Agile is the best way to get there. So you're not the normal you're not the normal coach.
He means that in a good way.
Yeah.
No, you're not. I mean, that's why I just said that too.
I'm starting to rethink the fact that I made him the host, but we'll get into that in another episode.
Yeah, you know what?
He was like, "Okay, where are you?" Apparently, I've been in Colorado or Washington State. Which is why we have Christy on the call and not Brandon reading books from 1700.
Thank God for that.
Yep.
All right, well, that wraps this episode. If you have questions or feedback, please send them to feedback@agileafterdark.com.
I should not burp into the microphone. Is that correct?
I kind of had one of those where I was like, sorry, Christy.